He fired me with a smirk and a handshake, thinking I'd go quietly. But he forgot the emails, his emails, that I'd backed up months ago. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten, I just forwarded them to the right people. Now I'm finally ready to tell you how it all unraveled. He called me in at 8:12 a.m., not even 15 minutes into the work week. Said he wanted a quick chat, but his eyes told a different story. I'd seen that look before. Not from him, not in this office, but in life. The kind people wear when they've already decided who's leaving and who's staying. The conference room was cold, always too much AC. I took the seat across from him, same one I sat in when I got promoted last year. Back then he told me I was essential, a cornerstone. Now, he didn't bother sitting, just stood at the head of the table like a judge. "We've decided to let you go." Just like that. No warm-up, no preamble. 5 years, and it boiled down to 8 words. I looked at him, didn't blink. He continued, throwing in something about restructuring, budget reviews, performance not meeting expectations, corporate language for, "We need someone to blame, and you're close enough." I nodded slowly. My mind didn't race. It filed. It remembered. His tone, the folder he placed in front of me, the way he avoided saying thank you. I glanced down. Final paycheck. Severance. Legal phrasing that read like it had been written a week ago, not this morning. I didn't ask questions, didn't beg for clarity, because I already knew this wasn't sudden. It had been in motion for a while. And unlike him, I prepare for storms before they hit. I stood up, shook his hand. He flinched just a little when I looked him in the eye and said, "Appreciate the clarity." He thought I was beaten, thought I'd disappear quietly, maybe curse under my breath in the parking lot and fade into the next poor bastard's cautionary tale. What he didn't know, what he'd clearly forgotten, was that he'd sent me every document, every questionable approval, every instruction to massage the numbers or clean up the report over company email. And I'd kept them, every one. Backed up, time-stamped, cross-referenced. I walked back to my desk. People pretended not to look, but I could feel it. The soft stares, the avoided eye contact, the low murmurs. Nobody asked what happened. Nobody had to. In an office like ours, silence does the heavy lifting. I packed slowly, left most of the desk clutter, took the backup drive I'd hidden under a stack of vendor manuals and slipped it into my jacket pocket, cleared my personal files from the desktop, logged out, walked out, didn't slam the door, didn't cause a scene. Because when you have the truth in your pocket, you don't need volume, you just need time, and the right address to forward things to. 5 years. That's how long I gave them. Not clock in, clock out time, real time. Weekends, nights, birthdays missed, vacations postponed. I built their back-end systems from scratch, patched their leaks when they broke things, kept projects alive that should have been declared dead. And I did it without complaint. Because that's how I was raised. Do your job, do it right. And eventually, someone notices. Someone noticed all right. But not for the reasons I deserved. When I first started, the office was half what it is now. No structure, no process, just a tangle of spreadsheets, mismatched invoices, and a half-broken ticketing system that everyone pretended worked fine. I fixed that. Quietly. I streamlined operations, documented workflows, even trained the manager who eventually became my boss. Irony doesn't knock. It walks right in and makes itself comfortable. I was the one they called when a client was screaming at 9 p.m. I was the one who stayed behind after the fire drill because someone had to reset the servers. And when Jenkins deleted the shared drive during a system update, who pulled 3 sleepless nights to restore it? Me. Not because it was glamorous, not because I was told to, because it needed to be done. I trained the interns, wrote the onboarding packet, built the SOPs. I didn't just do my job, I made their jobs possible. That's what loyalty meant to me. And then one day, it didn't matter. No warning, no conversation, no, let's figure this out. Just a folder, a forced smile, and a line about going in a different direction. As if I were a pair of shoes that didn't match the new outfit. The same man who once called me a linchpin couldn't even look me in the eye for more than 5 seconds. He didn't see me anymore. He saw a name on a cost sheet. But here's what he didn't know. I paid attention. I kept records. Every time he asked me to streamline a vendor invoice that didn't add up, I saved it. Every "keep this between us" request went straight into a folder titled Insurance. Because I'd learned over the years that loyalty in corporate America is a one-way street. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself walking into oncoming traffic. So no, I wasn't nothing. I was the guy who kept the wheels turning while they took the credit. I was the one they leaned on when things broke, who never got a bonus but always got the blame. I was the invisible backbone of that place. And now I was free. Free with a folder full of facts and a very clear memory. They wanted to play chess. Fine. I just happened to remember every move they made. It was a Thursday afternoon when he leaned over my cubicle and said it. Casual, like he was asking me to grab him a coffee. Hey, when you get a sec, clean out the old threads from the shared drive. Just some spring cleaning. There was a tone to his voice, too light, too rehearsed. I'd worked with him long enough to know when he was bluffing. I didn't ask questions, just nodded and opened the directory. It was all there. 5 years worth of project logs, internal emails, invoice approvals, task assignments, hundreds of threads. Most people would have deleted everything in bulk and moved on. But I hesitated. There was something about the timing. We weren't in a tech crunch, no audit notice, no security breach. And yet, he wanted those files gone. Just those. So I copied the entire archive onto a personal encrypted drive. Quietly, no drama, no trace. Just dragged and dropped while sipping bad coffee from a cracked mug. Then I opened a few of the older email threads and started reading. The first one that caught my eye was from 6 months back. A vendor had overbilled us by 20% and I flagged it. He replied, "Just approve this one, we'll square it later." We never squared it. 2 months after that, another one. "Can you redate this invoice so it hits next quarter? Don't want the board asking questions." I remembered reading that one the first time and wondering if it was normal. At the time, I'd assumed he had a plan, that there was some above my pay grade reason. Now it read differently. Now it sounded like someone playing with fire and expecting me to hold the match. Then I found the thread about the subcontractor. He'd promised them a retainer, but never filed the paperwork. When they complained, he told me to backdate the contract and say it had been lost in a spam folder. "Make it sound like an admin mix-up," he wrote. "They'll calm down." That wasn't miscommunication. That was deliberate. Line by line, the picture sharpened. Every approval had my name on it. Every reworked invoice, every retroactive date, mine. He never signed anything directly. Always the nudge, always the hint. And I followed orders because I trusted him, because he was the boss. But now I understood why he wanted those emails gone. Because they weren't just digital clutter. They were a breadcrumb trail, one that led right to him but with my fingerprints all over it. I didn't sleep much that night, not from fear, just clarity. I saw it now, the setup, the plan. He'd been building it slowly, like a chess player positioning his pawns for sacrifice. And I was the pawn. What he didn't know was that I'd memorized the board, and I'd just saved the game. It didn't take long for the pieces to click. 2 days after I got walked out, a buddy from the accounting team called me from his personal number. I could hear the tension in his voice before he even spoke. "They're saying it was all you," he said. No hello, no small talk, just that. "All what?" I asked, though I already knew. "The budget errors, the compliance gaps, the missing vendor paperwork. It's all coming up under your logins. They're framing it like you went rogue." I sat down on the edge of my bed. My apartment still smelled like cardboard, boxes I hadn't unpacked from the move last month when they told me I'd been promoted. They'd sold it to me as growth, as trust. In reality, they were just moving the target closer to the trap. He told me the audit started quietly. Something triggered it upstairs. Maybe a board member asked too many questions. Whatever it was, the numbers weren't lining up. Payments to vendors that didn't exist. Invoices with no supporting documents. Approval chains that stopped at me. Because of course they did. Every red flag led to my name, my credentials, my activity log. The emails were vague enough to protect him, precise enough to bury me. I remembered how he'd always asked me to forward approvals or copy him on confirmations, but never from his account. Always mine. "Just easier," he'd say. "You're faster with that stuff." It wasn't easier. It was intentional. I hung up and opened my laptop, opened the folder, pulled up every thread, every document. It was like watching a slow-motion heist where I was the getaway driver and didn't realize it until the vault was empty. They needed a fall guy, someone to absorb the hit when the audit came through, someone low enough not to draw media attention, high enough to plausibly explain the errors, someone replaceable. They chose me, and for a moment, I almost believed them, almost let the shame settle in, almost questioned myself. But then I remembered. I didn't create the vendors. I didn't reroute payments. I didn't sign off on false numbers. I was told what to do, and I did it, trusting that the people above me were honest. That's the danger, isn't it? You don't notice the noose tightening until your feet don't touch the ground. I wasn't angry yet. Anger needs time to boil. What I felt was colder, clearer, like the sharp air the morning after a storm. I saw it all now, the narrative they'd write, the story they'd spin, the loyal employee who got careless, who made mistakes, who had to be let go with regret. But I wasn't going to let them write my ending. I still had the emails, and I was done being quiet. I remember my dad's voice more clearly than his face these days. "You don't start fights, son," he'd say, usually after wiping blood off my scraped knuckles or pulling me aside at school. "But if someone throws the first punch, you finish it clean." He wasn't a violent man, just steady, measured. A mechanic with oil on his hands and patience in his bones. He believed in dignity, even when others didn't. So when they fired me, I didn't shout, didn't demand a meeting or storm down the hall waving my badge. I just went home, cracked open a warm beer, and opened the folder I'd quietly named insurance months ago. It wasn't much to look at, just subfolders, dates, plain text files, PDF exports. No flashy names, no gotcha tags. But I knew exactly what was inside. It was the digital shadow of every corner I'd been asked to cut, every gray area task I'd executed with raised eyebrows and silent compliance. Not because I liked it, because I thought I was protecting something bigger than myself, my team, my job, my future. I scrolled through one of the oldest threads. He had written, "Let's massage this before it hits finance, clean it up a little." Vague enough to deny, specific enough to act on. Another email asked me to reroute a payment as a placeholder. He always made it sound harmless, temporary, like we were just bending rules until they snapped back into place. They never snapped back. I highlighted keywords, timestamped the trails, matched the approvals to his calendar invites. Everything was connected, just subtle enough to look accidental unless you knew what to look for. And I knew. Because I'd lived it. I'd sent the emails, filed the reports, clicked the buttons that made it all move forward. But now, I was staring at it from the outside. Not as the guy trying to hold the ceiling up, but as the guy buried under it. What struck me most wasn't how shady it all was. It was how careful he had been to make sure his name was never attached directly to any decision. Always a forwarded message, always verbal instructions followed by a casual, "Can you summarize that in an email request?" He'd been building a firewall, one email at a time, and I was the flammable material on the other side of it. But he'd made one mistake. He thought I'd delete everything when I left. He didn't count on me being my father's son. So I kept my head down, kept my mouth shut. But I started tagging files, drafting a timeline, documenting every discrepancy, every quote, every favor I'd been asked to do that now looked more like a felony than a shortcut. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to land where it belonged, and I was just getting started. It was buried in a thread titled Vendor Alignment Q2. Harmless name. Easy to miss unless you were looking for it. I almost skipped over it myself, but something tugged at me. A memory. Him leaning over my shoulder one afternoon, pointing at a spreadsheet and saying, "Let's just clean this up a bit for optics." I clicked the thread open. 4 emails deep. There it was. His words, plain as day. "Hey, can you adjust the vendor ID numbers to match the internal list? We don't want finance asking questions. Just clean it up for optics. Same values, just shuffle the codes. Thanks." That was it. One paragraph, a few lines. But to me it lit up like a flare. Because vendor IDs aren't decorations. They tie directly to billing records, payment approvals, and audit logs. Changing them doesn't clean up anything, it rewrites the story. It hides which vendors were paid when and for what. I remember doing it. I didn't question it at the time. I thought he'd handled the explanation if anyone ever asked. But nobody asked, until the audit. And now, somehow, I was the one they were questioning. I scrolled down further. Another thread, this one from a month earlier. He'd approved a batch of invoices from a third-party contractor, ones that went over budget by nearly 40%. At the time, I flagged it. Told him the numbers didn't match the sow. His reply was short. Approve it. It's already done on our end. Paperwork's just a formality. I had the message, time-stamped, from his company address. He later told HR those invoices had been submitted without proper review. Blamed it on me. Said I rushed them through without sign-off. It was his word against mine, and if I hadn't saved that email, it would have stayed that way. But I had it. I had both of them. They weren't dramatic, not the kind of thing you post online to go viral, but they were proof. Tiny bricks in a wall of intent, because altering records for optics isn't a suggestion, it's a directive. Approving budget overages and denying them later isn't confusion, it's a cover-up. This wasn't carelessness. This was planned. And I realized something as I sat there, rereading those emails under the glow of my desk lamp. He'd never thought I'd fight back. He saw me as a worker bee, useful, quiet, disposable. But I hadn't deleted anything. And now, with those messages in hand, I wasn't just defending myself. I was loading the first real shot. He started the fight. Now I was preparing to finish it. I didn't sleep much that night. My apartment was too quiet, the kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something to break. I sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open, cursor blinking over that one folder. Insurance. The smoking gun emails were there, yes, but I didn't know what to do with them. So I did what I always do when I'm circling a problem too big to solve alone. I picked up my phone. Her name was Megan. We used to share a cubicle wall 3 years ago, back before she left for a job at a compliance firm downtown. Smart as hell. Sharp eyes. One of the few people I'd ever trusted with real questions. We'd grab lunch every so often, mostly stayed in touch through LinkedIn messages and the occasional sarcastic meme. I called her personal number, no preamble. Just, hey, can I ask you something hypothetical? Shoot, she said, and I could hear her flipping through something on her end. Paper, maybe. She always multitasked when she listened. Let's say you worked somewhere for years, and someone higher up asked you to nudge some numbers, clean things up for optics. Nothing huge, just enough to smooth things over, and now you're the one getting blamed in an audit. She didn't say anything for a beat, then, softly, do you still have the original emails? I do, I said. Good, she replied. Don't send them to anyone. Don't forward anything. Bring them to me, tomorrow. That was it. Not, I'm sorry. Not, are you okay? Just calm, clear instruction. It was exactly what I needed. The next morning, I put the drive in my coat pocket and walked the 12 blocks to her firm. It was raining, soft, cold drizzle that felt appropriate somehow. Like the sky was doing the slow cry I hadn't. Megan met me in the lobby and brought me up to a small, glass-walled conference room. She slid her laptop in front of her and pulled out a notebook. Let's see what we're dealing with, she said. I plugged in the drive, hand steadier than I expected. She clicked through the files, her expression neutral but focused. The first few documents didn't move her, but when she opened the vendor alignment Q2 thread, I saw her eyebrow twitch. He actually typed this? She asked. I nodded. And this one, she continued, opening the invoice approval. This is him directing you in writing to bypass protocol. You realize that, right? I do now. She leaned back, crossing her arms. This isn't just sketchy. This is a pattern. If you deleted these, you'd be done. But you didn't. Nope. She looked at me for a long second, then smiled, just a little. Okay, she said. Let's talk next steps. For the first time since I'd been fired, I felt like I wasn't alone in the ring. I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to throw punches. I just needed someone who knew where to aim. The room felt smaller with the door closed, like the walls had leaned in to hear. Megan slid her laptop across the table, inserted the flash drive, and waited while her firm's encrypted shell processed the files. No small talk, no awkward jokes, just the hum of the AC and the slow loading bar on her screen. I watched her face. No reaction at first. She was good like that, controlled, unreadable. But then her eyes narrowed, just slightly, the way they always had when something didn't add up. She leaned forward, clicked into a message thread, then another. Her hand came up to her chin, thumb resting beneath her lip. That's when I knew she saw it. "He signed off on all of this," she said finally, voice even but firm. I nodded. Every instruction came from him. I executed the steps. I flagged concerns. He told me to move forward anyway, and now, I'm out, and it's like none of that ever happened. She clicked through a few more files, then looked up. "You understand what this is, right? This isn't poor communication. This isn't a misunderstanding." "I'm not trying to ruin him," I said, and I meant it. "I just don't want to take the fall for his choices. That's it." Megan leaned back, arms crossed. "You're not wrong, but just so we're clear, he set you up. This was surgical. He didn't just let you get burned. He walked you to the fire and tossed the match." Her words settled in my chest like weight. Not panic, certainty, because she was right. I'd suspected it, felt it in my gut. But hearing it said aloud, backed by someone who dealt in evidence, not feelings, that hit different. She closed the laptop gently, like it held something volatile. "Here's what we're going to do," she said. "We make a clean timeline. Every instruction, every document, every approval, everything that links his words to your actions. You don't send anything. You don't speak to anyone from that company. Not yet." I sat back in the chair, exhaling for the first time in what felt like days. "So what's the play?" She smiled, small and tight. "Let's make sure you don't take the fall. And then, if there's fallout, he'll be standing under it, not you." I left the building with empty hands and a quiet mind. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I wasn't fumbling in the dark anymore. I had help. I had proof. And more than anything, I had something my old boss never expected me to keep: leverage. All from one simple transfer. It started with a text. Short, vague, from a former teammate still at the company. "You didn't hear this from me, but someone tipped ethics. Big." I stared at the screen for a minute, thumb hovering over the reply button. I didn't ask who. Didn't need to. I had a pretty good idea how the spark got lit. And I didn't regret it for a second. Megan had connections. She didn't say much, just asked the right questions to the right people, floated the right documents in the right circles. We never said the words aloud, but we both knew what was happening. And now, it was in motion. Word spread fast in that office. Always had. The moment something shifted even slightly, it trickled through the walls like a gas leak. I started hearing things. People whispering about more meetings, more questions. The audit, which was supposed to wrap quietly in a week, had been extended indefinitely. My old boss, let's call him Graham, wasn't his usual confident self anymore. Another message came through from a buddy in IT. "He hasn't cracked a joke in 3 days. Keeps checking his phone in meetings." Good. I imagined him at his desk, watching his carefully managed world start to tilt. I wondered if he was thinking about me, about the day he handed me that termination folder and thought it would be the end of the story. It wasn't the end. It was the ignition point. Another message came from someone in finance. "They're reopening all the Q2 and Q3 vendor approvals, cross-referencing everything." That was the tell. If they were checking everything, it meant someone had handed them a reason to, a pattern, a map. I wasn't cheering, I wasn't gloating, I didn't need to. The satisfaction wasn't in revenge, it was in the stillness. The quiet confirmation that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't crazy, that what I saw and felt in those emails wasn't paranoia. It was real. And now other people were seeing it too. I went for a walk that night. No destination. Just shoes on pavement, rain in the gutters, the city lights flickering off wet asphalt. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was carrying something alone. My phone buzzed again. Another text. "Ethics called an all hands for next Monday. Mandatory." That was corporate speak for damage control. I stopped walking, looked up at the sky. It was clearing, just a few stars peeking through the haze. Graham was losing control of the narrative, and I hadn't even said a word yet. The call came mid-morning, just as I was sipping my second cup of coffee in the quiet hum of a cafe a few blocks from home. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the voice on the other end was unmistakably corporate. "Hi, this is Sherry from HR. We were hoping to have a quick conversation with you about your time here. Strictly routine, just tying up a few loose ends." Loose ends. Sure. I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel it, then replied, "Of course, I'm available tomorrow." She sounded relieved, like she thought this was going to be easy. It wasn't. The next day, I walked into the building like I still belonged there. Old habits. Badge long deactivated, but I signed in at the front desk and took the elevator to the third floor. They put me in a glass-walled conference room with 2 HR reps, Sherry and a guy named Carl. Both smiled too wide, their eyes doing the real talking. "Thanks for coming in," Sherry said, clasping her hands on the table. "We just wanted to clear the air, get your perspective." I nodded, stayed quiet. Let them lead. Carl leaned forward. "There's been some confusion around certain approvals and workflows. Your name came up, and we're hoping you can help us understand what happened." And there it was. The setup, the gentle pressure, the implied threat dressed as curiosity. I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim black folder, slid it across the table, slow and steady. "This might help," I said. They hesitated before opening it. I watched their faces as the first few pages registered. The shift was subtle, eyes narrowing, posture stiffening, the silent alarm bell of professionals realizing they just stepped on a landmine. "These are emails?" Carl asked. "They are," I said. "Internal threads, all time-stamped, all verified. Direct instructions from my former supervisor, including some that contradict the reports filed to finance and ethics." Sherry's smile faltered. "We'll need to escalate this," she said, flipping to another page. "Do you have digital copies?" "I do," I said, "but I'm only sharing them with counsel or the appropriate authorities. You asked for my perspective. That's it, in black and white." They didn't argue. They didn't try to spin it. That told me more than anything else. They already knew something was wrong. They were just hoping I wouldn't have proof. I stood up, took the folder back. "Let me know if you have any other questions," I said. "Happy to help, if we're all telling the truth." They didn't walk me out, didn't offer a handshake, just watched as I left the room, carrying the one thing they hadn't expected: documentation. And now the story wasn't just mine. It was on their desks, too. 2 days after that meeting with HR, I got an email from legal. Not the junior-level assistant kind, not boilerplate. This one came from the Senior Compliance Counsel. Subject line: Request for Conversation Documentation Review. They didn't ask. They summoned. I met them in a high-rise office across town. Clean glass, sharp suits, no small talk. They brought coffee but didn't offer any. 2 lawyers, both calm, both with tablets already open. They'd reviewed the folder I gave HR. Thoroughly. "We've been made aware of certain irregularities involving past approvals," one of them said. "We appreciate you coming in." I just nodded. Let them talk. What I didn't expect was what came next. After 30 minutes of cross-checking timelines, approvals, and instructions, the older one, a woman named Alice, closed her tablet and looked at me carefully. "You're not the first person this has happened to." I sat still, processing. She leaned forward, hands folded. "We've had 2 other internal cases in the last year. Similar patterns. Documents shifted under someone else's credentials. Blame quietly redirected. But this is the first time someone brought us everything. Emails, metadata, intent. The first time someone had the paper trail. The first time someone didn't go quietly. She didn't say his name, but I knew she meant Graham. I didn't say much, didn't have to. They were already building the file. My folder had just accelerated the timeline. By the end of the week, I was contacted by a board member, not legal, not HR. One of them. A name I remembered from the executive emails. They asked to meet for lunch, discreetly, off-site. We sat at a corner table in a quiet restaurant, the kind with tablecloths and menus printed in cursive. He didn't order anything, just sipped water and asked questions. Calm, direct, precise. How long did you work under Graham? 5 years. And this pattern, these instructions, how far back do they go? I told him everything, not embellished, just facts. He didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, just nodded occasionally, like he was cross-referencing it against something he already suspected. You've been thorough, he said when I finished. You've handled this professionally. I wasn't trying to blow it up, I told him. I just didn't want to be the one holding the bag. He nodded again. Understandable, and appreciated. We'll be taking it from here. It was the kind of lunch where you shake hands and part ways knowing that things will never look the same behind the curtain again. And Graham, well, I had a feeling his time at the top was running out. Because it wasn't just about one mistake anymore. It was a pattern, a trail, and someone had finally followed it to the source. He buried too many bodies, and now they were all being dug up. I didn't make a scene, didn't post a screenshot or type up a dramatic thread. No cryptic status updates, no calls to coworkers fishing for sympathy or inside info. I went quiet, intentionally. There's a certain power in silence, if you know how to use it. While everyone else scrambled, emails, meetings, internal whispers, I sat back and let the machine turn. Because once you put truth in the right hands, it doesn't need your help to make noise. It runs on its own fuel. A week later, I got a letter from the company, certified, thick envelope, the kind they only send when they've lawyered something 12 times over. I opened it at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and steady hands. The first page was an apology, not some generic HR template either. This one had names, specific references, acknowledgement of errors in internal handling and oversights during compliance review. No admission of guilt, of course. They're too careful for that. But I could read between the lines. The second page reinstated my severance in full, the amount they originally tried to minimize. Recalculated, signed, approved. The third page was a letter of recommendation. It read like a love letter to my work ethic. Consistent high performer. Critical to key operations. Maintained professionalism under pressure. All things I knew were true. All things Graham used to say in private but never put on paper. Until now. It was their way of closing the loop, cleaning the mess without admitting how dirty it got. I folded the documents back into the envelope and placed them in the drawer beside my desk. Not out of sight, just somewhere close. A reminder. But I wasn't finished. Because while they were tidying up their end of the story, I was still holding the rest. The parts that didn't belong in a file cabinet or a severance agreement. The pattern, the deception. The quiet rot that went deeper than one bad quarter or a few suspicious emails. Graham hadn't just made a mistake, he'd built one. Brick by brick, year after year. And I wasn't going to let him quietly vanish into another leadership role like nothing happened. I didn't raise my voice, didn't send threats, I simply compiled the remaining documents, the patterns Megan and I had mapped out, the way he coached others. New hires, junior analysts, to do the same things he asked of me. And I prepared to send it to someone who could finish what I'd started. Because I wasn't in it for revenge, I was in it for truth. And the truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits quietly in the inbox until the right person opens it. It came in the form of a casual text, like everything else in this story that turned out to matter. You free for lunch this week? We've got something to run by you. It was Megan, of course. The friend who didn't flinch when I brought her 5 years' worth of quiet warnings wrapped in digital folders. She'd help me dissect the mess, translate chaos into clarity. And now, apparently, she wasn't done. We met at a small place near her office. Low lights, slow music. The kind of place where people talk about deals instead of drama. She slid a folder across the table, not unlike the one I once handed her. "This isn't severance," she said, grinning. "It's an offer." I opened it. Title, Senior Systems Compliance Analyst. Salary, higher than I'd ever pulled before. Benefits, full. Remote option, checked. But what caught my attention wasn't the pay. It was the language. Collaborative decision-making. Autonomy encouraged. Clear ethical standards. Words that actually meant something coming from someone who had seen what I'd been through. I looked up. Is this a real role or a mercy hire? Megan laughed. You kidding? You're the reason 3 investigations just opened across multiple departments. We want someone who sees what others don't. Someone who documents everything. I nodded, slowly. I don't do politics, I said. She leaned in. Good. We've got enough of that. What we need is someone who can see the iceberg before the ship gets near it. I signed the papers the next day. No hesitation, no weird gut feeling, just the quiet certainty that I was walking into something built right. Day 1, my new manager called to welcome me. We talked through onboarding, systems access, what I'd need in terms of setup. He paused before ending the call. One more thing. How do you like to work? What helps you do your best? I didn't hesitate. Quietly, I said. He chuckled. Then you'll fit right in. And just like that, I wasn't a ghost in someone else's machine anymore. I was part of something built with intention, not just ambition. I got my laptop the next week, spent the morning customizing my dashboard, setting up my filters, syncing my files. Nothing dramatic, just small, deliberate steps. And in the background, I still kept the old folder. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me what happens when people mistake silence for weakness. This time, I wasn't being quiet because I had to. I was quiet because I chose to be. And that's a different kind of power altogether. It started with an email, no subject line. Just a screenshot from an old coworker. Internal memo circulated late on a Friday. Effective immediately, Graham Reynolds has stepped down from his position as Director of Operations, citing personal reasons. We thank him for his service and wish him the best. No farewell party, no cake, no "we'll miss you" thread in the company Slack. Just a carefully worded exit and a collective shrug from those who'd seen it coming. People started whispering. They always do. In hallways, over coffee, in side-channel group chats, the kind where truth floats between emojis and half-sentences. Heard it wasn't really voluntary. Someone said ethics flagged 3 projects. Vendors threatening legal action. Then it got louder. One of the vendors Graham had strong-armed, manipulated into backdating contracts and adjusting rates, decided to push back. They filed a complaint, then a suit, breach of contract, fraud. Suddenly, emails weren't just uncomfortable, they were evidence. A compliance probe launched a week later, external firm, full access. They were tearing through years of approvals, cross-checking everything. I wasn't part of it, not directly. But I saw the ripples. Contacts from inside started reaching out. Whatever you gave them, it hit hard. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because this wasn't about victory laps or I told you so's. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, finally showing up on paper. I stayed focused on my new role. My inbox was full, my meetings productive. I spent my days doing what I always wanted, real work, clean work. Systems that ran because people followed the process, not because someone like me bent the rules behind the scenes. No more doublespeak. No more for optics. No more scrubbing timelines or adjusting vendor codes because someone higher up didn't want to explain an overage. Just the job, done right. And at night, when I shut down my laptop, I didn't feel the weight I used to. The constant second-guessing. The tightrope walk between what I was told to do and what I knew was right. That tension was gone. Graham's name disappeared from the company directory a few weeks later. His LinkedIn went dark. No new roles, no goodbye post. Just silence. And me? I didn't post either. Didn't screenshot the memo or send it to Megan with a smug caption. Because I didn't need to. The fallout was his. I had already moved on. What Graham never understood, what most people like him never do, is that the quiet ones are usually the ones paying attention. While he strutted around in meetings throwing buzzwords and delegating blame, I was in the back end, building systems, logging approvals, mapping every chain of command because someone had to. Someone had to make it all work. And it all ran under my login, not out of ego, out of necessity, because he didn't want traceable responsibility. So when something needed to be documented, when a system needed configuration, when approval logs had to be maintained, he'd say, "Just have it run through you, you're faster." What he didn't know was that everything we built, every tool, every file, every process, we did it under my credentials. I didn't need to hack anything. I just clicked View History. System logs don't lie. Every invoice approval he forwarded to me was attached to a project ID I'd built. Every contract change came through a ticketing platform I designed. Every exception he asked for went into workflows I created to protect him. Ironically, the very ones that would later expose him. When the audit team started digging, I didn't have to fabricate anything. The story told itself. The logs showed who uploaded what, who changed fields, who signed off and when. It was all there. He thought the system was his, but he never learned how it actually worked. He thought I was just the middleman, the executor, the one who nodded and typed and made things go. He never realized I was the architect. I remember one conversation, months before this all began, where he told me, "Don't worry so much about documenting everything, just get it done." I'd nodded at the time, but I documented it anyway. Not because I didn't trust him, though maybe I didn't, but because I trusted myself to remember the way things actually went down. So when everything fell apart, I didn't panic. I didn't need to scramble for proof or piece things together from memory. I already had it. Indexed, archived, labeled in folders that looked boring but were anything but. He underestimated me. He thought quiet meant weak. Thought loyalty meant blind obedience. Thought he could rewrite the narrative after cutting me out. But the logs didn't lie. The records didn't forget. And the system he tried to bury me under? I built it. So when it finally collapsed, it wasn't just justice. It was architecture. It came on a Thursday, late afternoon. I was between meetings, sifting through project notes, when the notification pinged on my screen. No subject line, just a name I hadn't seen in months. Graham. For a second, I just stared at it. Could have been spam. Could have been some auto-forward from an old chain. But it wasn't. I clicked it open, half expecting a rant, a defense, maybe even an apology dressed in corporate spin. It was 2 words. You win. That was it. No signature, no explanation, no attempt to twist the story or salvage pride. Just a flat admission. Like he'd finally run out of moves and this was his way of folding the board. I stared at the screen for a long time, letting those words hang there. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I knew I wouldn't. He didn't deserve a reply. Not because I hated him. I didn't. Not anymore. That part burned off weeks ago. What I felt now was something closer to indifference. A quiet confirmation that I'd been right to walk away, to document, to stay calm. He thought I'd come undone when he fired me. That I'd scramble, beg, maybe lash out and burn myself in the process. He thought I'd vanish. Instead, I rebuilt. Better. Cleaner. And now here he was, on the other end of a ruined reputation, typing out a 2-word concession to the guy he thought was just a pawn. The thing is, I wasn't playing for checkmate. I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted the truth out in the open. I wanted to clear my name and walk away with my integrity intact. That was the win. Not his email, not his fall from grace. The win was never reacting on impulse, never raising my voice, never stepping out of character, even when it would have felt good. The win was watching the machine unravel itself under the weight of its own lies, and knowing I'd planted the truth in exactly the right places. I moved his message to a folder marked Resolved. No dramatic delete. No forwarding it to friends for high fives, just filed it away and got back to work. Because I wasn't living in that story anymore. He might have finally understood what happened. Might have realized I wasn't the kind of person you frame and forget. But that message wasn't for me. It was a mirror. And whatever he saw in it, he'd have to sit with it alone. It's strange how quickly peace becomes your new normal. The first time I logged into my new company's systems, it felt light. Not because the job was easier. If anything, the problems were more complex. Bigger scope. Higher stakes. But the weight was gone. That low-grade dread I used to carry in my chest like a second spine. Gone. I didn't realize how much tension I'd been holding until it wasn't there anymore. Here, people listen. Not out of obligation, but because they actually want to hear what I have to say. My experience matters. My ideas aren't just taken, they're credited. I don't have to repeat myself to be heard. I don't have to document everything just to protect myself. I still do, because habits like that die hard. But now it feels like diligence, not defense. My team's good, talented, no egos. Just people who want to do their jobs well and help others do the same. We solve problems without throwing anyone under the bus. We own our mistakes, fix them, and move on. It's efficient, it's honest, and it's new. I sleep better now. Full nights, no stress dreams about missing emails or audit trails gone missing. I wake up and don't dread checking my inbox. I laugh more too. Not forced or awkward, just real. The kind that sneaks up on you when you forget to be guarded. It wasn't always like that. There were days at the old place when I forgot who I was outside the job, when everything revolved around staying ahead of someone else's mistake, when my entire value felt tied to how quietly I could clean up messes that weren't mine. Now, I finish work, close my laptop, and still feel like myself. I have energy for hobbies again. I call people back. I cook dinner instead of grabbing takeout and zoning out in front of a screen. My life feels like mine again. The other day, my new manager pulled me aside after a call. "Hey," he said, "I know we brought you in for compliance and systems, but I've noticed you're really good at seeing the gaps. Ever consider leading a cross-functional task force?" I didn't know what to say, not because I didn't think I could do it, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen for the things that make me valuable, not the ones that make me convenient. That conversation stayed with me, because I remember who I used to be, before the stress, before the fallout. The guy who liked solving puzzles, who cared about getting things right, not just done. And now I feel him again, stronger each day. New ground, clean, solid, honest. And this time I'm building something that won't be pulled out from under me. The folder still lives on a flash drive in the back of my desk drawer. Not because I'm holding on to anger, and not because I plan to use it. It's not a weapon anymore. It's a reminder. I don't open it. Haven't in months. But I see it every so often when I reach for a pen or a charger, and I nod at it like you would an old scar. It's proof of where I've been, what I survived, what I learned. Graham's gone. Last I heard, he's doing some vague consulting work, still trying to sound important without anyone actually giving him responsibility. The company never issued a public statement about what happened. Of course they didn't. Corporations are great at cleaning messes without admitting there was ever a spill. But people talk. And in the right circles, the story got out. Quietly, precisely, the way truth always does. And me? I'm good. Better than I've been in years. The new job fits like it was tailored for me. Not just the role, but the environment. People value my work. My name doesn't just live at the bottom of a ticket. It's spoken in meetings, attached to ideas, credited when it counts. I've rebuilt piece by piece, not just a career, but trust in others, in myself. I'm not bitter. That surprised me. I thought I might be. I thought I'd carry some quiet rage, waiting to get even. But somewhere along the way, that burned off, and what remained was sharper, stronger. Not fueled by spite, but by clarity. Because the best revenge isn't yelling. It isn't swinging back. It isn't proving them wrong with a loud, self-righteous speech. The best revenge is not needing revenge at all. It's watching the fire they started consume only them, while you sit on the other side of the hill, warm, safe, and at peace. That folder, the one I built in silence while they thought I wasn't paying attention, gave me the power to walk away without fear. But it also gave me the power to walk towards something better. I don't need to tell that story anymore, not unless someone asks. But when they do, when they lean in and say, "How did you stay calm through all that?" I just smile and say, "You'd be amazed what silence can do when you aim it well." This is closure, not loud, not dramatic, just real, just earned, and mine.